Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Cooking in College. So, this week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. First off, I'm not wearing an apron and I'm wearing a hat. Why? I don't know. But we're going to be talking about knife skills. So, in cooking, you're going to use your knife pretty much all the time for every dish or every recipe you make. There's going to be some form of a knife involved. And I think it's pretty important that you understand how to properly use a knife for when you're cooking so that you don't end up cutting yourself or injuring yourself really badly and end up going to the hospital. So we're going to start with the basics. I've got all my knives set out here. The first thing we're going to talk about is different kinds of knives. So this one that I have right here, this is the one you guys have probably seen me use the most on the show. It's every chef's favorite knife. It's the one that gets used most often. It's an 8-inch chef's knife. Yeah, it's called a chef knife for a reason. It's the one that gets used all the time. So my second favorite knife, the one I use the second most often, is this one right here. It's what we call a paring knife. It's nice little small. It's about, I'd say, 3 to 4 inch blade. Fits really tight in the palm of your hand. It's another great version of a knife. This one that I have, this is, I think it's a 6-inch utility knife. Yeah, 6 inches. 6-inch utility knife. This one I got a serration on. Just so you use more for stuff like bread or, a little bit tougher materials. Next we have this right here. So this is another version of a chef knife. Only difference is it has a flat edge. This is a Japanese style chef knife is what they like to call it. You're gonna see this a lot in like sushi restaurants and stuff like that. It's really not much different. The technique on it when you cut is a little bit different, but still a nice 8 to 6 inch chef knife. Here we have a bread knife. It's another big, long, nice and strong knife. This one does not have serrations, but most of the time they usually are going to have serrations like this utility knife. And then here I have my last two knives. It's another chef knife. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner, and then another paring knife. This one is definitely shorter and thicker, but some people like that. So those are all my knives. Got them all nice and laid out here. I use them all the time. I absolutely love all of them. Next thing we're gonna go over is how to properly hold a knife and the basics of just knowing your way around the knife. Okay, so I put all my other knives away. Now we just have the 8-inch chef knife. This is the one we're gonna talk about, the one I'm gonna explain everything with, because it's the one you're gonna use most frequently in your cooking. You can do all the things that all these other knives do. Just some of these other knives might be a little bit better at certain things, but a knife is a knife at the end of the day. Your 8-inch chef knife is your big one. So the first thing you want to worry about, how do you hold a chef knife? You think, oh, it's got a handle, I'm just gonna grab it like that, and hold it like that. No, that's horrible. You have no control over what you're cutting when you do it like this. When you have a chef knife, the way it's gonna work, so you're gonna put your first finger, your index finger, across the side here. You're gonna put it down there, and then your thumb is gonna pinch the back side of the knife like this, and you're gonna be gripping the knife down here at the edge. Some knives will have kind of like a little bevel on the very end of it, kind of give you a place to rest your fingers. This one doesn't. That's just how I like my knives. I don't like that bevel on it, but some of them will. So again, index finger here, thumb here, pinching the knife here, and the rest of your hand wraps around the handle right here. And this should be how you hold your chef knife all the time. Gives you a nice little controlled grip. Knife isn't going to get away from you. You have very precise cuts, a lot of control over the knife at this point. You want it to be firm up here where you're pinching. You want to be firm there. And then your backside where your other 3 fingers are wrapping around, you want to be very loose. You want all your control to come from this focal point. That's where the knife is balanced at, and that's where you're going to get the most of your control. So that's how you hold a knife. Next thing we're going to move on to is some cutting techniques and more specific kind of stuff like that. Okay, so here we've got a nice little cucumber, and now I'm going to start explaining the proper way to start cutting stuff. So first thing, with the cucumber, one main issue that you're going to see or notice, it's a round object. It's very hard to keep a round object under control when you're trying to cut it. This applies with anything, right? So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your knife, just kind of cut the cucumber in half, get a nice flat surface for it. This flat surface gives us a nice foundation to cut from, or to cut the object with. It's not going to roll around. You're going to have a whole lot easier time controlling this way. Next thing, when it comes to cutting, to protect your fingers, you're not going to sit there and hold the blade or hold the object like this while you're trying to cut. Let's ask to get a finger in your soup. We don't want that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your first 3 fingers here, and you're going to curl them. You're going to curl them like that and bring this front knuckle out. And that's what is going to be your guide for when you're cutting. So that knuckle's going to be out. You're going to rest it right against the edge of your blade. And that's going to be your guide. Make sure you keep your fingers tucked. And as long as they're tucked, you can do this all day. You don't have to worry about cutting yourself. See, I'm not even looking down, and I know I'm not going to cut myself because I can feel it on this knuckle. And with this finger curled back, I'm not going to cut myself doing anything like that. Make sure you stay along this knuckle. If you cut something that's a little bit bigger, you can tuck this knuckle a little bit back more and use the long side of your finger kind of as your guide. Like that. Since we've already gone ahead and covered how to hold a knife and what to make sure you're doing with your knuckle and all that when you're cutting, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how I cut something like this, right? So I'm going to be doing the claw technique, gripping the very top of the zucchini, and then my other 2 fingers, my pinky and my thumb, I'm going to put them back here on the back end of the zucchini, and I'm going to start by just moving my hand backwards as I cut, but then when I get to about right here, right, my thumb will be able to move to the back of the zucchini here, and from there I'm going to be pushing the zucchini towards the knife, okay? So it should look like this, being sure that we're keeping that knife pressed against the knuckle, just slowly moving backwards, gripping the knife with our pinch right here. This board's wanting to move around, so we're going to move boards real quick. Make sure you're keeping everything pinched together, making sure you're keeping that knuckle pressed nice and flush against your knife blade so that you don't cut yourself. Just moving it back. Every now and then, take time to clean off your knife because stuff will get stuck in the end of it, especially if it's something that's got a lot of liquid hanging out in it, like this cucumber. Keep moving it back. So now, at this point, we're going to clean these off and put these over here on this other board. So now at this point, we've cut enough of the cucumber down. I'm going to take my thumb, put it at the back of the cucumber over here. We're going to be using that to push the cucumber into the knife. So I'm not having to move my knife too much. And we're going to get a lot more done a lot quicker. Eventually you will reach this point right here where it is very small. And you go, what do I do at this point? Well, logic would say, oh, you're done. Don't want to cut yourself. But then Chef Lucas says, just kind of wing it and be very careful. It's not entirely advised, keeping a very small kind of 3-finger pinch grip at the back here, and being very careful with that. And that is how you get some nice half-moon zucchinis like that, using that cutting technique. Okay, so now right here we have an onion. I'm going to show you guys how to properly dice an onion using some of these same techniques that we talked about previously. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it in half just like we did with the zucchini. This gives us another nice flat surface. But because it's an onion, we're going to want to get some of this outside kind of wrapper skin off. We don't want that. Another issue that comes with an onion, the tears. You don't want to start crying. So how do you prevent yourself from crying? Well, a lot of people think just cutting an onion itself is what causes you to cry. That's false. What causes you to cry is this homeboy right here, the root. When that root gets cut off from the rest of the onion, it releases that chemical that causes the crying. So we want to keep that intact. This homeboy down here on this side we don't need, so we're gonna go ahead and cut that off and just throw that away. That's gonna help us peel everything. So I'm gonna find just the outside, most outside layer that's still kind of got that wrappery, papery texture on it. Just peel that away. There we go, we have a nice clean onion for us to work with at this point. So what you're gonna do with an onion, first thing you're gonna do is a claw grip. You're gonna make 2 horizontal cuts going like into the onion sideways. I'm gonna start one really low. One thing you wanna make sure you do is you do not wanna cut all the way through the onion. So see here, I've cut about 3/4 of the way through. We're gonna stop there, pull a knife out, and go up a little bit higher. And repeat that same process, being very careful to not accidentally just get a little chunk of your finger or something like that caught in there while you're trying to hold on to the onion. So we've got our 2 cuts. Next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go down the onion this way, making some more cuts, going all the way through, but not going all the way through the onion down to the cutting board, but we don't wanna come through the top here, so we're not cutting an actual slice off, we're making a bunch of little slits in the onion. Again, still doing this all with a pinch grip. Taking your knife, making very small little slits, taking the tip of your knife and just kind of pushing it down through there and dragging it back. You're gonna have some chunks of onion come out with it. That's completely fine. Don't worry about that. You're still gonna get plenty of onion. As I get towards the middle, instead of dragging it through, I'm gonna pierce the top, then press the knife down. I'm using both my hands to help guide it, pressing this left pointer finger on top of it. My right pointer finger, I've moved up to the top of the blade also. I'm using my middle finger and my thumb for my pinch grip now. This helping us give us nice, clean, little guided cuts. And as you can see, I'm doing lots of cutting through this onion and no tears even remotely. I'm not even thinking about it. My eyes aren't even burning, nothing's burning. So I've gotten all the way through this onion, made little cuts all along the way. I've had some onions come out, but now that we've had those 2 horizontal cuts and all the little vertical slits, we're gonna take the onion, turn it back this way. We're gonna go back to our normal pinch grip. Your claw grip on the onion here, using that knuckle, and just kind of run it down across the onion. And all those little cuts that we previously made, it gives us a nice, really finely diced onion. You keep running down. You're gonna have little, I call them wings, on the outside here sometimes. That's just the way the onion folds itself when you're cutting into it. You can just take extra little time, cut off those individually. Going on this, and then we're going to reach this point where the slits aren't really working anymore. We've gone past the point where we cut the little slits. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the onion up this way and just run my knife through it like we did with the cucumber. Getting all the sides, just chopping it down as fine as we can until we have nothing but this root left and no tears. You got some nice little diced onions. So you can use this with a lot of kind of round vegetables, fruits, stuff like that, and create a nice little dice. This concept works with most of them. Onions, it works pretty well, in particular because of all the layers. It helps create some nice kind of almost uniform little diced onion bits. Now we're going to move on to the tomato. Okay, so here we have a tomato. It's a nice big hamburger tomato. But one major issue that you run into with tomatoes a lot is all the juice. You get that juice all over your cutting board, it gets everywhere, it creates a huge mess when you're trying to dice them. So we're going to solve that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start the same way we always did, cut it in half. But this is where we're going to take the next step. Put one half of this aside, get a small little bowl. You're just going to kind of squeeze your tomato a little bit. You're not trying to crush it or anything like that. Just give it a nice little squeeze, and you're going to force all those insides out. Get all those nice seeds out and help kind of squeeze out some of that juice. So it's gonna deform your tomato a little bit, but it'll be fine in the end. If you have to, get in there with your fingers and claw some of this stuff out and get some of that juice out. Okay, so we got some of that juice out. We're gonna put this back on the board. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. And we're gonna apply the same techniques that we used on the onion to this tomato here. We're gonna get another nice fine dice. So, again, 2 horizontal cuts. It'll cut much easier than the onion will because the tomatoes are a lot softer vegetable. Come back and then we're gonna make all our slits. It's gonna wanna fall apart on you a little bit, but just work through it. It'll all come out great. The end. Keep going, speed it up a little bit. You see we got some of this here, so all this juice right here. I'm just gonna put that aside into a bowl. I didn't juice it quite as well as I would have liked to. We're gonna come back through here and give it dice just like we did on the onion. And don't think just because I squeezed all the juice out, you're losing all that great tomato flavor. You're still gonna get a ton of amazing tomato flavor in the skin and the flesh of the fruit. Just getting that juice out helps save us a lot of time, helps save us a lot of mess. And if you're making dicing tomatoes for something, I don't think you want all that liquid in there. You want the actual tomato, unless you're trying to make something like a tomato soup or tomato puree or something like that. Then finish this off, and boom. Get some nice diced tomatoes, not as juicy or liquidy or messy as you would do them if we had just cut straight. Okay, so we cleaned off our board, cleaned off our knife. Now we're gonna show you how cut a pepper like this one. This applies to a lot of peppers or a lot of vegetables that kind of have an inside carcass kind of thing that we want to get out. We want just purely the skin. It's not a juicy vegetable like a tomato or something like that. I've done this a lot on the show. I've cooked with peppers a lot, so you should know how to do this, but if not, you can go check out one of our other episodes. I think it's going to be up there, or up there. It's going to be somewhere where I cut a pepper. You should go check out that episode. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to cut off the top of the pepper, and then we're going to take this and we're going to cut off the bottom. And we're trying to get this as close to the bottom that we're going to cut off all the little caps almost, and create nice little holes all the way around it. But we don't want to cut it up super high because we want to still get a lot of that good flesh on the outside. So I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to put this top aside too. We're going to still use these. Now we've got this nice little inside core right here. What are we gonna do with that? Am I gonna just grab it and reach in and rip it out? No, because we're a little bit fancier than that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my knife, I'm gonna cut a slit down the side, making sure to not cut into the core. Turn the pepper over, and then just run my knife on the skin on the inside of the pepper. Cutting all this out, cutting out all the seeds and little fleshy white bits that we do not want. We're in a nice long kind of pepper belt, almost. Throw that away. So we got a nice little pepper belt. Cut all the white stuff on, for the most part, out of the inside. That's the part we don't want. We're gonna press this pepper out. It's gonna break a little bit, that's fine. And we're gonna apply the same technique that we did again with the zucchini. Pinch grip, and just all along down the pepper. Pepper's a little bit easier material to use for cutting and stuff like this. Just because it's a little tougher, it's not going to move around on the board as much, so I can bring my hand back. I don't have to have as close of a grip on it. But as we get shorter, the grip's going to get a little bit tighter. And now we have a nice kind of what's called a julienne, which is just a long, thin strip like this. That's what the technical chefs call it. Some nice julienne peppers. But let's say you want to dice these. Well, luckily for you, because we did this pepper belt, you can just take these, rotate them over a little bit. All these julienne peppers, trying to keep them together. Just claw grip. Just give it a couple nice rough chops through there. And you got some nice diced bell peppers now. Now I saved the top and the bottom, right? What are we gonna do with those? Well, take it, we're going to cut around the stem of the pepper here. We're going to cut around that. This one's got a long stem, so it's going to dip on that side. We're gonna throw this top a little bit away, and the bottom bit, everything on this is still good. You just run your knife right through this. Careful as you get your fingers. You've got some more julienne bell peppers. And these are going to be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, because since it's coming off the bottom, you're going to have all those nice little bumps and hills. And those chunks from the top, treat them the same way. This one will be a little bit rougher on our chop here because we're not trying to be super fine dining chefs. We're not trying to get really precise cuts or anything like that. We're just trying to cut up a bell pepper into nice little chunks that we can cook in something later. Whether that's some kind of stir fry or whatever else. So there you go, your nice diced bell pepper there. Now we're going to move on to the last one, mincing something, and we're going to do this with garlic. So I'm going to clean this off and we'll get to that. Okay, so now we've got something that's a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to cut. We've got some garlic cloves here, right? You're not going to be able to julienne a garlic clove like you would a bell pepper. Now you turn it into a half moon like you would a zucchini. You're not going to dice it like you would a tomato or an onion. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to mince this. And this is a little bit more complicated technique. Not too bad though. The first thing I do is I take my knife and I cut off the ends of the garlic just because I don't want those kind of tough nubby bits ending up in my garlic mince. And do that on all these. So I'm doing this with my chef knife, but there's a big 8-inch chef knife being used on a little 1-inch piece of garlic. What's something I can do instead? Well, this is where something like our paring knife would come into play. It's a lot smaller blade, we need a lot tighter grip and a lot more control on it. Need a lot finer cut. Make sure we cut off just purely that nubby end of the garlic and we get as much of the actual clove that we want. Get a really nice little fine cut there. So there we go, we got our 4 garlic cloves, but since we're about to mince them, I'm going to move back to my big boy knife. So mincing is not as fine of a process as something like a julienne or creating half moons or something like that, right? So what we're going to do first, I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to give just all these cloves a couple little rough chops, still using my pinch grip here. A couple rough chops, just kind of break them down a little bit, get them into smaller chunks almost. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our knife. You can kind of use your knife, oh, that one went away. Use your knife as kind of like, I don't know what you call it, not a spatula. You can just kind of use your knife to slide everything together into one big chunk. So here's where we're going to start how we mince, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm using my pinch grip again. I'm going to be very loose here on the handle. Then I'm going to take my other hand. I'm going to rest it at the end of the blade down here. It creates kind of this nice little seesaw-y action here. And that's what we're going to be using to mince. Right? So I'm going to take this, and as I mince, I'm going to be rotating in kind of a half moon as I make my mince. And it's going to be able to mince really quickly, not accurately, but you're going to get a lot of nice little small chunks as we make our way through this. So I'm going to do it slow for you guys first. So I'm just rocking the knife back and forth, running it through this clump of garlic. Then after I get all the way through, push everything together. Be very careful as I wipe my knife blade down. And we're going to run through it again. Wipe my knife blade down. Wipe everything back together. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I'm making lots of cuts and I'm not moving through the clumps too fast or the pile of garlic that we have here. I'm not wanting to move through it too fast. I want to get a lot of cuts in really fast. Make sure everything's nice and tight. The tighter your grouping of something like this, like a piece of garlic, the better your mince is going to come out. And as you get more used to this technique, you can sit here, you can rock it back and forth, go through it a couple times. It ends up becoming kind of relaxing. Just kind of look up. Oh, what's that? Oh yeah, I'm just making dinner tonight. Don't worry about it. What? The dog got out again? Well, you better go catch him. I don't have a dog. I don't know why I brought that up. So, clean off our plate. Push everything back together. And we're gonna steer drive again. Yeah, I already took my midterm. Of course I got an A on it. What are you talking about? What? What's that? Oh, your professor doesn't like you? Well, you probably deserve it. So, now as you can see, we've run through it a couple times. And we've got a nice, really finely minced garlic here. It looks amazing. And if you buy whole cloves, or not cloves, but you buy whole heads of garlic, it's a lot cheaper to do this a bunch of times than to buy that jar of pre-minced garlic that comes in all that really gross, ugly garlic oil and all this other stuff that you don't want. And it's gonna come out, it's gonna be nice and fresh, and it'll taste so much better. So, that's how you mince. That's going over knife skills. If you guys want another episode talking about maybe what kinds of knives you should buy, how to know what you're looking for when you get for a knife, or go looking for a knife or something like that, comment that below. Thank you for coming to this week's episode of Cooking in College. Remember, Hot Pepper Challenge is coming up. There will not be an episode next week because fall break, we ourselves are gonna take a break. So come back in 2 weeks for our next episode of Cooking in College. We got something real special coming up for you guys. Thank you again for coming to this week's episode. And remember to like, subscribe, comment. We'll see you guys around.